Hi everyone, this is 7th grade Elevate. Today we will be writing a percent as a fraction. This part of the lesson is particularly easy. The second part of the lesson is what might be a little bit challenging for students. So it tells you that a percent is a special ratio. It is a rate per 100. The word percent is broken down into two parts. And so the word per means out of, and the word cent means 100. So when you put percent together, it literally means out of 100. This is helpful for kids because when they are converting a percent to a fraction, sometimes they get confused. But if I know that this is read as 20% and percent means out of 100, then it would just be 20 instead of percent out of 20 out of 100. And it can be modeled by shading 20 parts out of the hundreds chart. Okay? So you will take about 2 minutes to model to students. If Gina has read 7% of the books in her library, what does that mean? So Gina has read 7 out of 100 books in her library. Then it says to write it as a fraction. You will show students how to write it as a fraction. And then you can ask students a bunch of different questions. What if I have a fraction? What if I have the fraction 19 out of 100? How would I write that as a percent? Students should say 19%. What about 43 out of 100? Students should say 43%. And then you can even go back to say, okay, well, how do I write 76% as a fraction? And students should say 76 out of 100, right? The second part of the lesson is around finding a percent of a number. And so this part is what might be a little bit more challenging. So to find a percent of a number, multiply the percent by the number. So you have here 30% of 50. Let me use a different color. So 30% of 50. We know that 30%, the word percent, means out of 100. So it's telling you the first thing that you want to do is to change the percent sign, convert that into a fraction. So now you are left with, instead of 30% with the percent sign, you are left with a new equation that looks like 30 out of 100 times 50, which we know this is 50 over 1, right? Whole number, multiplying fractions by whole numbers. Instead of writing 50, we're going to write 50 over 1. And then the next step is to do the math. So 30, we multiply across when we multiply fractions. So 30 times 50 gives us 1,500. And then 100 times 1 gives me 100. I have to simplify. I get 15 is my answer. So 30% of 50 is 15. Now, we'll jump into this example here. So it says find 40% of 120. So again, when we are going to do this math, we cannot have the percent sign. So we want to rewrite the percent sign as a fraction. That is step 2. Write the percent as a fraction. So 40 out of 100. Percent means out of 100. The word of indicates multiplication. And then 120. 120 has to be over 1 because it's a whole number. Then you do your math. Students may not know what 40 times 120 is, but students should know what 4 times 12 is, 48. Insert your zeros back. We had 2 zeros that we ignored, so we're going to put those 2 zeros back in. And then 100 times 1 is just 100. When we are dividing by 100, we are getting 2 place values smaller. So cross out those 2 zeros, and we are left with 48. So you will model that question for students for 3 minutes. Then you are going to launch them into partner practice for about 15 minutes. The first part of their partner practice is they are just writing those percentages as fractions, and then they are writing fractions as percents, using word problems as well. And then they are going to jump into questions 1 through 4 on this page around finding the percent of a given whole number. So they're going to have to do their math, turning the percent sign into a fraction, and then doing the multiplication. This lesson doesn't correlate with any other lesson. And as always, your sprint fluency is at the end of the packet.